Funding for this program was provided by the annual financial support of viewers like you. Additional funding for this program was provided by REI.
One day in Vietnam, I missed a bus. It didn't really matter at the time. I knew another one would come along. Like everyone else here, I had time to spare. I'd quit my job in Boston, so I had as long as I needed to explore. I was heading up into the Central Highlands. My plan was to hike the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But then, this is Vietnam, and even the best laid plans can go astray. I was too busy chatting to see exactly how it started. I was sure he had an accomplice pushing up the wagers. Each of those bills was worth a month's pay. The game was turning deadly serious. We were so preoccupied that we didn't see what was happening outside. One turn too many, and the brakes had given up the ghost. I was quite prepared to get back on board until I turned the corner and ran smack into the bus I'd missed the day before. All 23 on board had died. This bus could leave without me. It was time to hike. This is the story of what it's like to travel for 7 months in Vietnam. My name is Karin Muller. It's also about what I didn't tell my mother I was up to, and all the adventures I did share with her in the letters I wrote home. Dear Mom, it's been 2 weeks, and still I'm waiting for an interview with the officials in Saigon. They weren't the least bit happy to hear of my intended travel plans. They say it's dangerous for a young woman to travel around without an escort, let alone hitchhike, and that I'm sure to be arrested, or worse. I tried to explain in my stumbling Vietnamese about my experience in Asia, about the Peace Corps in the Philippines, but I don't think I got through. They insisted that I follow the tourist route from Saigon to Hanoi along Highway 1. I didn't dare tell them I'd already hired a private guide to take me south into the Mekong. It's a place so flat that although we're 50 miles from the sea, they've built the banks to accommodate a foot-high tide. It's an elusive land, neither earth nor water, but something in between. Time moves to a different rhythm here. I'm learning to relax, to just let go and see where I end up. Rather like my boatman, who seems to have mastered the art of getting lost. Turning around in these narrow canals is quite a trick. All the huts were made of thatch, until I saw a school? Police station, they told me, and made me put my camera away. I wonder if Americans are welcome here after all these years, especially with a camera. I've never done it before, but I really want to make a film with my little Hi-8. Late one afternoon, we bumped into an old man who invited us to share a meal, and then hurried off to gather up the ingredients. Mud, silky smooth and soft as pudding. I wasn't half as afraid of going barefoot as I was of handing off my camera to a nearby villager, until I realized what was hiding in the mud. The old man was called the Patriarch. He'd lost 3 sons in 2 wars, and now had no one left to help him work his fields. In his 63 years, he had walked every inch of the soft brown earth for miles around. He says I can stay a while. His wife just laughs when I try in my stumbling Vietnamese to say thanks. The monsoon rains have come, and what little earth was solid has turned into a thick brown stew. What I really want is to go outside and stomp about in puddles. Instead, I settle down to study Vietnamese. My 30-year-old grammar text tells me exactly how to order room service, but doesn't seem to have a word for rain. When I asked how long the rains will last, they laugh and measure out the time against the growing stalks of rice. Rice, the golden harvest that lies at the end of 4 months of exacting labor. It is the center of every meal and every ritual. And it is the Mekong, the river of 9 dragons, whose rising waters flood the paddy and allow the rice to grow. A timeless land. Enchanted. They tell me that a spirit messenger brought the first sack of rice to Vietnam. But it was the Chinese who introduced the water buffalo and irrigation works over 1,000 years ago. It's been 3 weeks. I'm beginning to feel accepted, especially by my hardworking patriarch. I never see him without his stockings of mud. I shall be sad to leave this place. The same rains that fed the growing rice washed me down the Mekong to My Tho. In the 17th century, European traders docked here. Then it had a reputation as a haven for outcasts, pirates and smugglers, and scholars who'd failed their examinations. Each left behind a legacy, but none as irresistible as French baguettes. The Vietnamese have taken something from every colonizer. 10,000 loaves a day pass through this place, each made entirely by hand. They cost 8 cents a piece when fresh, and if not sold in hours, their price drops by half. The crispy loaves are fed into a distribution system that finds its way to almost every shanty in the country. I wanted to follow her, but I had another path to take. Saigon was just as overwhelming the second time around. Everyone, it seemed, was giving capitalism a try. No one calls it Ho Chi Minh City. It's Saigon, a city still haunted by its past. There's an extraordinary energy here, and most of it is directed towards food. Everyone is busy chasing their next meal, though if you're not quick enough to catch it on the run, you can always get it before it has a chance to hatch. Everything is fair game here, and the stakes are high. In a country with over 75 million people, not much that might be edible gets away. I settled on a corner soup stall. Raw meat laid on a bed of homemade noodles, steeped in rich brown broth. And tried not to think what else could have been on the menu. The animal market. An appalling custom the Vietnamese acquired from their Chinese overlords. They believe in the medicinal value of animal parts. Tiger bone for strength. Pickled snake for impotence. Mom, it would have made you quite ill. It made me want to leave Saigon. There are things I don't tell my mother, like that bus ride from Saigon, or my plan to hitchhike the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Americans have been forbidden from the area until just recently, and I'm attracting quite a crowd. I've heard stories about unexploded bombs and booby traps, but for the moment at least, the dangers are much more mundane. The trail crosses into Vietnam at several points along this road. I'm told that parts of it were once paved, but mostly it's a complicated web of footpaths, by now completely overgrown. It starts just north of the DMZ and runs south through Cambodia and into Vietnam. The Viet Cong used it to infiltrate supplies, sometimes on foot and sometimes pushing bicycles with 500-pound loads. Nowadays, they carry recycled garbage. The provincial towns of the Central Highlands are dirty, depressing, and uniformly gray. The underbelly of communism that foreigners aren't supposed to see. And state-run stores certainly aren't worth the trip. But just across the street, capitalism is making a comeback. Although it clearly hasn't caught up with my hotel. The curfew keeps me in from dusk to dawn, and even if I wanted to, there's no chance of filming here. I'd be arrested on the spot. And the police are everywhere, watching. My only chance is to hike into the hills. I've taken on a local guide, who warns me what will happen if we stumble upon a government re-education center, and doesn't want to go on camera. I'm more worried about the unexploded bombs. A graveyard certainly didn't calm my nerves. The Vietnamese respect the spirits that guard the bodies of departed souls. Once disturbed, they can do great mischief among the living. So much for the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It probably continued on the other side, but any bridge had long since washed away. I figured I'd test the current and at least cool off. But I was quickly in over my head. And barely made it out. I suppose if the spirits teach you anything, it's that if you want control of your own destiny, you better be prepared to pay the price. Dear Mom, I've given up the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Instead, I'm heading up the coast, to Hanoi, and I was wondering if you might meet me there. You were, after all, the one who encouraged me to do this trip. It's lonely here without you. I'm on the Unification Express, an odd name for a train that now runs slower than when the French first built it 60 years ago. It took half a day for me to go slightly batty in the rear compartment. So when we stopped, I tried to hitch a ride up front. The engineers had no idea what I was talking about, but they just laughed and let me climb on board. The two of them had been on duty since Saigon and would take turns driving all the way to Hanoi, 2 days and nights without a single break. I thought someone had thrown a rock against the side of the train, but the truth was even more unnerving. A single track, an oncoming train. The tattered note was our only warning. Locomotive 34, 4 minutes and 48 seconds away. We pulled off the track with barely 18 seconds to spare. We were still well short of our destination when we came to an unscheduled stop. The two drivers stayed behind to fix their beloved engine, but before I left, they made a point of handing me off to the replacement crew, who didn't seem too pleased. But after several hours, he warmed up to me and even let me have the best seat on the train. His name was Antoine, and he knew the tracks the way Mark Twain knew the Mississippi, and could tell me to the year how old each section was, and what gear best suited the coming gradient and curve. And before the ride was over, he gave me my childhood fantasy. I drove the train. It was the harbor at Nhiachang that finally lured me off the train. 10,000 fishing boats work these waters. Nearby Hoi An was once a major Southeast Asian port where Persian ships filled their holds with molasses and bags of oriental tea, while the city's factories churned out vast quantities of sugar to fill the European lust for sweets. And then, over time, the river silted up and Hoi An disappeared into obscurity. Back at the train station, I thought I'd found democracy in action. Old and young, soldiers and peasants fighting to be allowed to buy a ticket. Then I reached the front of the line and was told that foreigners weren't permitted on this train. So much for democracy. There has to be another way. My mother tried to make me promise not to buy a motorbike. But I was sick of waiting for uncertain rides and wanted to pull over where and when I pleased. I hadn't counted on the traffic, though, and I was soon wishing the world wouldn't go by quite so fast. The gods, they play with us. They gave me my wish. It was a Honda 450, but I called it the Beast, and it made every effort to live up to its name. I thought I was attracting the crowds, but it was my $500 bike that was taking center stage. They had never seen one so big, and spare parts would be impossible to find. The only thing in worse shape than my cranky old bike was the highway itself, if you could call it that. It's hard to believe that this was all the government could spare on the only paved road connecting Saigon to Hanoi, especially since just around the corner, private enterprise was booming, built on Vietnam's capital, human labor. I suppose that half a bridge is better than none at all. For the first time, I was pleased to be on a bike. Nothing seems to faze the Vietnamese. I wish I had their patience. Dear Mom, Hanoi at last. I hope there'll be a letter from you, telling me when you're coming. 1,000 years ago, this place was called Tan Long, the city of the soaring dragon. Then some unromantic soul changed its name to Hanoi, the city on the bend in the river. Inside its old walled city, it feels like a medieval citadel. Its courtyards and twisted passageways echoing of another era. It has none of the frantic capitalism of Saigon. Each of its famous 36 streets is named after a single product, still made with secrets handed down through generations. Traditional medicines and the street of gravestones. Music Street, and Paper Votive Street, which I called Christmas Street. After dark, I walk along Lake Kim with a pagoda at its center, built in memory of an enchanted sword used to repel the Chinese invaders over 500 years ago. Legends and old streets are interesting enough, but I'm beginning to share the Vietnamese obsession with all things edible. Compared to the slim pickings along Highway 1, Hanoi is awash in all kinds of spices and exotic tastes. Pigeon eggs and spicy snails, slabs of tofu fried with rice, boiled snakes and silverfish, and pure white fat. I can't wait to dig in. This city clearly takes eating seriously, perhaps in memory of its most beloved citizen, a one-time cook's apprentice who spoke half a dozen languages and became the father of Vietnam, Uncle Ho. He lived a simple life and wanted a simple death. Instead, they keep him embalmed and on display in here, except when he gets shipped to Moscow once a year for routine maintenance. Ho was the father of Vietnam but left behind no children. And death in this Buddhist country is not a simple business. It is the sacred duty of the family to pay proper homage to his 3 departing spirits. This man was 69, they told me, and had left behind a wife and 8 children who mourned him well. He had died of rotting stomach, but had lived to see the generation beyond his children's children. He was being taken to his family's village to be buried in the company of the ancestors. They say one spirit will return to dwell unseen among the living. One will stay beside the body, and the third will join the ancestors. The mourners return to the city to celebrate and retell their tales, just as they know he must now be doing, standing tall among the ancestors. There's no point in going back to Hanoi. Mum has decided not to come. Her letter arrived just a few days ago. My place is with Dad now, she writes. Mom, are you sure? You raised me to go out and see the world. I so want you to come and share this trip with me. The beast sure wasn't helping my mood. It had broken down over 30 times in 6 weeks and was in no danger of mending its ways. I took the children out to find the missing link, on the theory that they were several feet closer to the ground than I was, but we searched in vain. The local mechanics could fix just about anything, but even they couldn't make parts from thin air. Spare chains were available, they told me, in Thailand. It was time to find another way. I know Mum wouldn't have approved of the motorbike, but I think this might have suited her just fine. It seems like every time I try to control events, they end up controlling me. Perhaps I should just trust fate. My new friends were taken aback that I would want to help them unload their cargo, and tried, successfully, to distract me by pointing out a nearby enclosure with some of the rarest animals in the world, the Vietnamese spotted deer, already extinct in the wild. I'd stumbled into a national park, one of only 2 in the entire country. The most interesting thing about Kuk Phuong was the monkey breeding station near its entrance, and the German director who ran it. Thilo Nadler had spent the last 2 years confiscating highly endangered gibbons and langurs from the park's poachers. I thought of Saigon's thriving animal market and knew what he was up against. He told me how they catch their merchandise. They shoot the mothers to collect the young, until one day there'll be no breeding females left. The monkeys are boiled for 3 days and nights until, as Thilo put it, they achieve the consistency of hot asphalt. The resulting stew is thought to cure everything from arthritis to impotence, a belief so pervasive that there are only a few hundred of these gibbons left in the world. Thilo sees extinction for many of Vietnam's endemic species. With their numbers dwindling, the breeding program is their last hope for survival. I sent one last letter home to say that I'd be out of touch for quite a while. Mum always taught me to think the best of people. I was already asking for a ride when I saw the stars on his lapels. A Russian army truck, driven by a Vietnamese lieutenant. He eventually found out I was American. "Welcome back," he said. We stopped from time to time to load up an assortment of tangerines and whiskey bottles. Suspicious cargo for an army truck, I thought, until I realized he was taking the local women and their produce to market without charging them. We'd reached the end of the road, but over the hill, a tiny village called Mai Chau. Just what I was looking for. A small cluster of houses surrounded by a sea of waving grass-green rice. When I first saw him, he was keeping a close eye on Main Street from his kitchen window. He took one look at me and ordered up a fat carp from his pond to celebrate my arrival. I was thrilled until I saw the other half of the coming feast. Badly stuffed intestines, rinsed in the water that doubles as the village latrine. His name, he said, was Tung. He was related, by birth or marriage, to almost everyone in Mai Chau. I wondered how it would feel to belong somewhere like that, and felt a pang of sadness. Later, he told me of his life in Mai Chau, of the leopard who had come in 1954 and taken a pig from under his house. He said he'd never left his village and planned to till his fields and tend his carp until the day he died. Then, in a forgotten corner of the room, I found his photo. A decorated soldier? Life isn't quite as simple as it seems. Tung had been born in 1931 and had never seen the inside of a school. In those days, Vietnamese was written with Chinese characters and was out of reach to all but wealthy scholars. Then a French missionary put our Roman alphabet to the sounds he heard, and suddenly the peasants could learn to read and write. The missionary was expelled, and the 2 priests with him beheaded, but his written Vietnamese has been in standard use since World War I. The children were let out early with instructions to study me, a task they took to heart. There was no getting around their fascination with my more peculiar habits. And then they showed me what a river's really for. After several weeks at Tung's house, I began to realize how much kindling was needed for our cooking fire. Every day I saw the women get up at dawn and hike high into the mountains to gather wood from their family lots. Five more miles. They walked barefoot and carried only a machete, which they used to fashion wedges and wooden mallets.
Phải hớt có sẽ cọm hạp đấy. Cua chả thời gian ăn tuần là giáo chỉ bó sẽ ký ăn tên.
When they were done, they climbed hand over foot while balancing baskets with nothing more than a bark forehead strap.
Thôi, đi về.
They rarely reached beyond my shoulders, and I felt big and clumsy beside them, so I asked permission to prove my mettle. I had no idea how strong they were. The baskets weighed over 100 pounds. It was 2 weeks before I could sit up without supporting my head with one hand. Vietnam's forests will almost completely disappear by the year 2000, in a country that discovered a new species of mammal just a few years ago. The leopards had long since been wiped out. Even porcupines and civets were getting hard to find. And the scarecrows had me completely stumped. In my 2 months in Mai Chau, I had yet to see a single bird. They say the sensual contact with the mud connects them to the land. I wonder how they keep their clothes so clean. They've asked me to stay till harvest time, when the village pulses with the steady heartbeat of the threshing shed, running day and night. 4 months of labor, hard-won security against the coming cold. Winter is coming, and if I am to cross the rugged Tonkinese Alps, it is best to do so now. I don't think I left behind a single straight row of rice, and they, in turn, never quite figured out my camera. I want to find my way into the mountains northwest of Hanoi, where the tribal people live. The other hitchhikers think it odd to see a woman traveling alone, and wonder what I'm running from. Still, they take good care of me, and always find me the best spot to sit. We're heading deep into the land of the Montagnards, the mountain people. These were the legendary fighters who the Americans recruited as a secret army against the lowland Vietnamese. It's their reputation for fierceness that keeps the Vietnamese police away. That alone made me want to go. The town of Sapa on market day. The place was bustling with Zhao, their heads plucked smooth under yards of folded cloth, and Hamang. The word means free people, and this is the only name that they will answer to. They are thought to have migrated from their ancient homeland of Siberia through China. The Vietnamese still call them Meo, a name that means savages. They have a reputation for poisoned blow darts and drinking blood, apparently deserved. The children's hats are brightly colored so that a spirit looking down will mistake him for a flower. The bangles symbolize the rooster, protector from all evil, in this world or the next. Throughout history, a Hamang woman's hand in marriage was bought with silver jewelry. I found a Vietnamese making tin copies of their earrings for sale in the marketplace, to the few hardy foreigners who are beginning to make it up this far. The tourist money brings in the world, and its unheard of luxuries. And the money also brings in alcohol. But watching, I noticed something odd. This wasn't a fist fight. They never hit him back. They were trying to hold him, to make peace. Strange name, savages, for these gentle people. I'm leaving Sapa to find my way among the mountain tribes. They will make me welcome, I hope. Trouble. The Chinese border. Foreigners aren't welcome here, especially since 1979, when 20,000 Chinese troops invaded Vietnam. Nowadays, they just terrorize the fish. And the Vietnamese still wonder what they're up to. The The Hmong worship both their ancestors and the many spirits that inhabit their natural world. Eyes are watching everywhere. I kept my mother's letters with me to protect me from their mischief. She pointed out a bridge upstream and warned me not to hike alone. I should have taken her advice. Next to the trail, a shaman's work. A bridge to pull a lost soul back into this world, one lured away by an evil spirit. Someone must be dying. In a nearby hut, I found the sickness. A sad place and deathly poor. They needed the few dollars I gave them to stay the night. She was dying of tuberculosis, but the real evil was the brown paste in her hand. Opium. No shaman's bridge would bring her back into our world. Follow the river, they told me. The Zhao live on the mountaintops, beyond the reach of medicine and motorbikes, and bridges. The little boys leapt from rock to rock like crickets. I followed like a water buffalo. The Zhao really live among the clouds. Across the valley, an unearthly noise. A rice thresher. Nothing changes here. It was near freezing, and I was falling ill. Perhaps the spirit along the trail, perhaps the creeping mist that clung to my sodden clothes. I had to find a place to stay. I slept for days. They paid me no attention. I felt rather like a ghost among them. The fog seeped in through glassless windows, but I was too sick to leave.
Okay.
The Zhao offered me their cure, a drink of fermented rice whiskey. They say it takes them to a secret paradise, and in the meantime keeps them warm. Sickness was all too common here. A baby had stumbled into the fire, and by the time they brought her to me, infection had set in. I didn't know that when I touched the baby's head, I was drawing out its spirit, making it unwell. They were strangely silent, afraid that if I drew attention to the child, the evil spirits would steal away its soul. And if the baby died, would they think it was because of me? I'd been up in the mountains for 7 weeks. I didn't know that a letter was waiting for me in Sapa, with bad news from home. My mother had had a terrible accident, A month before, she had fallen down a set of stairs, breaking several bones and slashing open her head. She could have died, and there was no way to reach me. I'm a traveler. Home is where I put down my pack. So why do I feel like a kite without its string? Hanoi feels suddenly so strange and threatening. I should go home. Dear Mom, I know you told me not to come home, that you're doing fine. I almost didn't listen, but then I realized that by staying, there is something I can do for you. For the last few days, I've been hanging around the animal market, talking to the dealers. I even asked to see if I could find a young black-faced gibbon, thought to be extinct. If any still existed in Vietnam, this was the place to look. He eventually produced a more common one with white cheeks, which he had already sold, he told me, for $1,000. I kept looking, made my decision, and bought them. A gibbon and 4 leopard kittens, no more than 10 weeks old. The marketplace had left them with bones so soft they could barely keep themselves upright. They hadn't tasted milk for weeks and couldn't seem to get enough. I recruited several other backpackers to help keep this 3-pound gibbon entertained. We had to feed her every 2 hours, day and night, and gently discourage her from chewing on her own arms, a psychotic habit she had developed in her metal cage in the marketplace. I had to get them out of Hanoi. I brought them all to the sanctuary of Cuc Phuong. The gibbon will one day help repopulate Vietnam's dwindling forests. Once grown, the kittens will be released inside the borders of the national park to live in relative security until Vietnam learns to protect this extraordinary natural treasure before it's all gone. I'm making one last trip to Ha Long Bay, where they tell me a great dragon once plunged into the sea, creating in his wake the magically beautiful Karst Islands. Apparently he can be seen in these waters from time to time. I doubt that I shall find him, but it's worth a try. It's not about getting there, is it? It's about the journey and the people that you meet along the way and those you come home to.
This is heavy.
I came home to find my mother healthy again.
Oh, look at that. Look at this. Oh, isn't that good?
She wanted to hear all the stories and all the things I hadn't told her I'd done. And no matter how much she'd worried about me, she was still enthusiastic about the next journey and looking forward, she said, to more letters from the trail.
It's so hard to hang on to. Want to put him overboard? Whoops.
To learn more about what it's like to travel in Vietnam, join Karen Muller for Hitchhiking survival tips and create your own adventure in an online guide at at www.pbs.org. Hitchhiking Vietnam is available on home video cassette for $19.95, plus shipping and handling. Funding for this program was provided by the annual financial support of viewers like you. Additional funding for this program was provided by REI.
This is PBS.